All right, so we have our recording going. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And we have two of our Canadian alums who are going to chat with us and, really talk about their starting points in optometry and the decision to do optometry pretty much up to current day and their practice modalities, what they've learned from ICO and how their ICO education has benefited them. So for those who are guests on the call, feel free to use the Q&A or the chat feature, and Brian and or Latasha will help me out with sort of monitoring that while I go through the questions we have for our speakers. So I will have you both introduce yourselves. So Dr. Francis, if you want to start and give us a little bit of who you are, where you come from, and sort of where you're currently practicing at.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Randy Francis. I am currently practicing in London, Ontario at a private practice. And I did my optometry education, of course, at ICO. And then I did a residency in ocular disease and primary care, also at ICO.
Awesome. Welcome, welcome. And Dr. Owusu.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Owusu. I am from Canada as well, obviously. Born in Toronto, grew up in Edmonton. Currently living in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we practice. We have a few locations that we practice at here. We're private practice owners. My wife and I, who is also an ICO graduate from my class. So we have a few locations here in Winnipeg and then one also in Alberta.
Okay, awesome. Welcome, welcome. So let's get started. So I have you guys think back to when you were considering optometry schools and, knowing that there are two schools in Canada. There's Waterloo, and then I think there's in McGill, but I think there's French speaking. So I know for a lot of students that sort of automatically comes off the list. But when you were considering optometry schools, what made you choose ICO?
I can go first. Sure. So it was a difficult decision. I was considering other professions at the same time, and ultimately I had fallen in love with, I'll be very open and say, I had fallen in love with another school. I had gone to my interview 2 days prior at SUNY, and I had decided that I was going to live in New York City, and that was it. There was nothing that was going to convince me otherwise. And as I was going through my interview at SUNY, they repeatedly asked me where else I had applied. And every time I would talk about ICO, they would tell me all the reasons why that was the school that maybe I shouldn't consider. That the violence, I was told I was going to get shot in Chicago. I was told that all these things were going to happen to me and that the education was subpar. And I couldn't help but think to myself, why are you targeting this one school? There's something about this school that you're not wanting me to understand or to hear. So long story short, I ended up traveling to Chicago 2 days later and visiting the school, and it took no time at all to change my mind. It was the best decision I made. Meeting the people on campus, within minutes of being on campus, it was just so welcoming, so warm, and everybody was really friendly. I happened to meet my now wife on that interview day, and so that was an added bonus. That's not something that I think everybody can say, but I was very fortunate to have that. But yeah, even just, and honestly, I'll tell you, one of my strongest memories was walking through the library. As soon as we were doing the tour, seeing all the students milling about the building, and then when I got into the library and I saw the big winding staircase, I just said, this is it. I've changed my mind. I'm no longer heading to New York. Chicago is where I need to be. And it was, in retrospect, it was the best decision I could have made. I'm very happy with the choice that I made, and I wouldn't do it any differently.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Francis.
Yeah, I'd say for me, honestly, very similar. It wasn't until, so I knew, of course, ICO's reputation. I talked to other students, other applicants, but what initially drew me there was a clinical program. I liked that we got started in clinic fairly early. I know some other schools, you aren't in clinic until like third year. I'm a type of person I already knew, like I like to be hands-on. So it was nice to learn it and then do it like, pretty almost back to back. So it was nice. We kind of got started with that first year, but it was interview day where I just felt, just like Dr. Oos said, just a welcoming atmosphere of ICO. I felt so welcomed. I felt like they wanted you to be there. And even just speaking with the staff and the doctors that I got a chance to speak to as well, it was just a different vibe that I liked. And so I knew right then and there that I wanted to go to ICO. I didn't even go to my other interviews. I was like, no, this is it. So it was definitely the atmosphere there that got me in.
Great.
If I could add one thing, actually,
Sure.
because you mentioned the clinical program, and I think that that's a really good point. You know, the and Tisha, you'd also mentioned Waterloo and Montreal. So I had some friends ahead of me who had attended school at Waterloo, which is a good school. But what a number of them had expressed to me was that as I was considering the different schools to apply to, that I might want to look at an opportunity that would provide me with the best possible clinical education. Three people in particular actually told me that when they were on their rotations, they felt that when they were with the students who had studied at ICO and maybe one or two other schools, while their knowledge of what they were seeing was very strong, you know, from their textbooks and classrooms, they felt that they had never really seen anything. And so they didn't really have much of an opportunity to have that hands-on learning that you get at ICO. So it was actually students from Waterloo who encouraged me to consider applying to ICO, despite the difference in cost. And with that, I'll say, you know, I was being accepted at ICO and at Waterloo, and I'm still proud that I made that decision to apply to, or to accept my position at ICO. That's, you know, one thing that students often ask me is whether or not it's worth it, with the cost being a little bit higher than it is if you were to stay in Canada and study at Waterloo. And as a practitioner now, I would say there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that it's well worth it.
And that's for us in admissions, that's a question we get a lot. And sometimes it's hard for us to say, yes, it's going to be worth it. And I think people may think, well, you're admissions, you're supposed to tell me that. And I always tell them, you know what, talk to alum, because they can convey that better to you, given they've gone through the program, now they're out there practicing, and they can see the benefits of an ICO education. So I thank you both for sharing your experience with that. Now, my next question. So Dr. Francis, I'll start with you. So you came to ICO, and I know you were very involved, and I mean very involved on campus. So if you want to talk a little bit about sort of your student life, you know, what the curriculum was like for you as you progressed through the program, and a little bit about some of the student organizations you had opportunities to be involved with.
So in first year, it was a lot of didactic courses. It was a lot of even just like little quizzes, things like that to get you kind of going with the program. Like I had touched on before, you also have the opportunity to be in clinic. I think it's in the fall, maybe in the winter. I think you have your first eye exam, I think, in the fall quarter. And then what you learned in the fall quarter, you got a chance to work with over supervision, of course, with some patients in the winter quarter. And then as you kind of progress, you go through into harder classes, I should say, or more in depth in terms of optometry. And then, of course, fourth year were the externships. And so during school, I knew going into school, I wanted to be more involved. I wasn't as involved in undergrad, and I knew that was something I really wanted to be, to just take part more in the community at ICO. So I did join a number of clubs. I was in private practice. I was the trustee for AOSA, NOSA. I did, of course, the Canadian Club I was in as well, Black Student Union. So there's quite a bit that I was involved in. And I think that was so beneficial for me, not only just getting the chance to meet other students, not only in my class, but of course in all those different organizations. They have like the second year reps and the third years, and of course the upper years as well. So I got to know more of the students that are just at ICO in general. And they gave me tips, you know, the upper years of like, of certain classes or like things to do or places to go even. So it was nice to get to know the community that way. And I think that was one of the most beneficial things too, apart from, of course, being in school, was just the community of ICO and just getting to know just the other students there. also other like staff and props and professors and attendings as well, because oftentimes they'd be guest speakers at events, or be the advisors of those groups. So it was nice to do that too.
Nice. All right, Dr. Owusu, same question for you.
Yeah, so yeah, I was pretty involved when I was at ICO as well. I was a member of Multicultural Association, NOSA. I was a class representative in first year, and then in second year I was president-elect, and then in third year I was student association president. And so that kept me pretty busy. It was definitely a little bit hectic at times, but well worth it. I think, as Dr. Francis said, like the experience was enhanced by having the opportunity to be involved. Just having that opportunity to interact with the students in a number of different ways, interact with the faculty in different ways, whether it was putting together or organizing different events that were happening at the school, or back at that time, as a class rep, we used to create the exam schedule, things like that. It really gave me the opportunity to sort of view the experience from a bit of a different lens, be a little bit more intertwined into all of it. And it was a lot of fun, and it was very rewarding. At the end of it all, I think that is one of the things that really enhanced my experience. And sort of getting to know some of the SA presidents from the different schools. One of the things that I was really proud of after the fact was that ICO really promoted that opportunity for you to get involved. And I think that I really appreciate that. While every school, of course, is going to do their best to ensure that you're as clinically and educationally prepared as possible for practice, I think one thing that ICO does really well, and I'll confidently say, I'll put ICO head and shoulders above the others, that they really want you to ensure that you enjoy your experience while you're in the building. It sounds so cliche to say that you're part of this family, but looking back on it now, I can say it truly is that the case. While you're there, you're a part of a little family, and that continues even after graduation. With having such a large alumni base, it doesn't really go away. And it's when you attend optometry meetings now, sitting on this side of it all, you can't help but run into people from ICO who you got to know during that time, getting involved. So I regularly and consistently and continuously advise students at ICO to get involved, because it's very rewarding.
I will add to that, and it just like harp down on that too, because even now practicing, and of course now in Canada and going to academy or just like other meetings, I always thought I'd have like kind of this disconnect between, okay, I'm going to move away and then I'm never going to see anybody again, or like how that works. But even at this last academy meeting, I saw so many people, of course, that we knew or like went to school with, of course, but then also that I met, like you mentioned, in the different clubs. So being like, for example, AOSA was a president there, but every school has a president of their AOSA. They have their president and president-elects, and then we always have meetings like during the year. So it's nice. I know people from all of the schools, and I now know people who live now in a bunch of different states, and you can go visit them if you want and things like that. So you really grow your network, and I think that's really important with getting involved. And that ICO not only, like you said, encourages you to do so, but just they have the opportunities for you to do so. So yeah, that's been awesome.
And it's almost probably dovetail into my next question, which was, looking back at your time as a student, what stands out? Like, what are some of your favorite memories? Dr. Francis, if you want to
Yeah,
take that.
I will say it was always the social events, and particularly the social events like with faculty, because I think it wasn't until probably like third, fourth year as well. Because of course, you enter first year, and then even faculty and staff, they're just kind of like, they just seem like so above you kind of thing. And it really was third and fourth year, where you're in clinic with them all the time. You realize they're people too, and they have their kids and they go out on weekends and stuff like that too. So even just hanging out with them like socially, that was really awesome. And of course, with school events and things like that, exploring Chicago, that's always huge. But also the clinical aspect, because especially the bond you create with your classmates, like, of course, optometry school is hard, but like you're going through it together. You're studying for things together, you're grinding it out together, you're on your highs and your lows together. So a big part of it, like both aspects, clinically and socially, was awesome. But it was nice, especially the networking side of it, events that school would have, and they really do try to make sure that you guys all enjoy yourself socially too. But that aspect was huge as well.
All right, good. So let's talk a little bit about residency programs. I know some students, end up pursuing residency programs, and some say, you know what, I want to go straight to practice. But Dr. Francis, I know you did your residency at ICO. So talk a little bit about sort of, why you decided to do a residency and some of the benefits of that. And I'll let you go ahead with that.
Yeah, so I decided to do a residency because I'm the type of person that I didn't want to be limited. I just wanted the options. I knew I wasn't going to go into like a faculty position maybe right away. I wanted it like maybe consider down in a few years. Maybe I teach a day at Waterloo. Who knows? But I didn't want that opportunity to not be available to me, or any opportunities to lecture or guest speak somewhere corporate, even like, speak for J&J or just like anything like that. I just didn't want any opportunity to be limited. And I knew that residency opens doors. To me, it was, it's only a year. I've already done 4. I could do another. The visa gave me another year. So let's do it. So I just didn't want to be limited in that. I just knew myself. And then I chose to do ICO because I liked the clinical aspect of ICO. The program allowed me to be as diverse in my clinical education than a lot of the other ones that I was either applying to or that I saw on, what's it called? OR Match on the residency, or no, on ASCO's website, on the residency programs website. And what I mean by that is that I did my residency in ocular disease, but I had the opportunity every quarter to pick another specialty that I could do certain shifts in. So I really liked contact lenses. So I did a couple quarters in specialty contacts, and then I did one in peds as well. And then you can choose different things if you wanted a preference for neuro as one of your, disease sessions, or glaucoma or anything like that. So you really had a good say in how the program, how your schedule was. So I really liked that aspect of it, that they were a little bit flexible in that aspect.
Awesome. And I always promote residencies. I tell students it is just 1 year. It's not that bad. Why not get that extra experience? But again, I know it's, not for some. And Dr. Wusu, did you do a residency? Or did you go straight?
Good question. So yeah, I was planning on doing a residency. It was actually up until sort of the 11th hour that I was heading in that direction. And then it was an opportunity for a position, a job in Florida that presented for both myself and my wife, that made me say, well, I'm not certain that this opportunity will still remain. And so I ended up having to make that difficult decision. But that said, I would echo everything Dr. Francis just said. While it was not the choice that I ended up making at the time, I recommend residencies to people almost every time we speak about it. I have a number of students who contact me directly and ask me what my thoughts are, and should they do it? Is it worthwhile? I'm going back to Canada. Is this even going to be of any value to me? And my first answer is always the same: is education is never wasted. And so you're going to gain a tremendous amount of education that you will be able to use in one way or the other. And whether it is, even if it's not specifically whatever it is that you've trained in, you've now furthered your ability to learn effectively, and you're going to be able to take that and use that in practice in some form or another. And so again, education is never a waste, and I promote it all the time. Again, my circumstance may have been a little bit unique in deciding not to, but one thing I'll add to that is, now as an employer, I have numerous associate optometrists who work for us, and those who have completed a residency, I'll make 2 statements. Those who have completed a residency tend to be much further ahead than those who have not in terms of preparedness to practice. Now, as an employer, it is not a requirement. I do not make it a requirement that you have completed a residency to be a practitioner in our clinics. I don't check everybody's grades. I don't do any of that. Now, a lot of the doctors who work for me are from ICO, so it is nice to hear, who your attendings were, because that does tell me a lot about what you know already. But it's not a requirement that you've done a residency. I'm not diving into that sort of thing. I do want to know who you are as a person. But when somebody does tell me that they're residency trained, it is an extra sort of, feather in their cap, because it makes me think, look, this person has been through it. First of all, they do know how to work under pressure, and they do know how to balance and manage their time and the difficult stress load and workload. but they're also clinically prepared. And so it's something that I do look at. Well, again, it's not something that you have to have. I will always look for it just in case it's there, because you will be stronger. The other statement I'll make, sort of tying back to one of the previous questions, is I feel the same about those who just graduated from ICO residency or not versus some of the doctors I have from other schools. ICO provides an education that while you're there, you can't really know what it is that you're getting and how it compares to the other schools. Now, being the position that I'm in, I have doctors who are from Waterloo, who are from Boston, who are from ICO. I've had doctors from Philadelphia. The ICO graduates are regularly ahead of the others in terms of preparedness. They come out ready to go, they hit the ground running, and those who have done the residency are just that much further ahead. So it's well worth it if it's something you're considering, and if it's just an opportunity to learn more, why not?
Yeah. And in terms of that preparedness, would you both say it's our patients who come through our clinical doors? Our faculty are great, and I tell all prospective students, I'm like, our faculty are great. Our patients, though, are the ones who you're learning from. It's what they're presenting with day in and day out. I happen to be a patient there. I mean, relatively healthy, no systemic issues. I get my glasses, contacts, and I'm done. But it's the patients who are coming in with various stages of glaucoma. And sometimes our students are like, that's like all I see. I feel like it's just more patients who are coming in with ocular issues, but it just makes you a stronger, in my opinion, a stronger clinician. So I always, attribute sort of that foundation to our patients. But Dr. Wusu, let's talk a little bit about sort of your practice and sort of your current practice setting and sort of what your typical day is like.
Okay, so I am, again, in Winnipeg, Manitoba is where I live. So we have 4 independent practices, private practices in Winnipeg, and 1 in Edmonton, Alberta. So it's hectic. My typical day is a little bit hectic. I've got 3 children as well, and so that adds a layer of busyness there. But it's a typical day. I do still see patients. I'm in patient care a few days a week, which is still probably my favorite part of the job. It's rewarding, it's enjoyable, and that doesn't change whether it's from first or second year seeing patients all the way through being a practitioner. It's just fun to interact with the other people or the person sitting in the chair across from you, learn a little bit about their story, learn a little bit about what you can do to help them out. Everybody comes in with a need, and you just have to find a way to address it. So whether that's a need of helping them through a systemic medical condition, or a need of getting them glasses, or a need of just being an ear for a few minutes while they're sitting in your chair, there are a lot of different things that, or a lot of different hats that you might wear after you graduate, some of which you wouldn't have even expected. There's an element of psychologist / psychiatrist being an optometrist. Once the door closes, people open up a little bit. And so my typical day involves a lot of conversation, a lot of chatting. I want all of our patients to feel like, their appointment may be 20 minutes or so. And for those who are early in clinic and the exam is 2-3 hours, you will get down to 20 minutes. Eventually it does happen, but while your exam may only be 20 minutes, I want you to feel like you've been there for 3 hours. I want you to feel that you've enjoyed an experience. And so when I'm in clinic, that's what I'm pushing for. And then when I'm out of clinic, much of it is managing the practice, of course, and also sort of coaching the other doctors and the staff to understand what it is to create that experience. For us, I think after years of education and going through it so many times, having drops put in our eyes in lab over and over and over, it's almost nothing to us. But to the patient, there are many people who are so riled up or worked up over it and may not even express that. And so one of our roles is to ensure that we can bring comfort to them. Sometimes that's just by providing information about what you've seen. Sometimes that's just sitting back and slowing down for a moment and letting them take a breath. And so for me, a lot of my day, or a lot of my time, is now spent coaching some of our doctors and our team to understand why that's an important part of what we need to do.
Now, did you, when you were in school, were you considering, or was your plan to do a private practice? And I feel like, because I know when I interview students and I ask them, I'd love to be, in a private practice. And, sometimes plans change, but I just sort of want to know how you made that decision.
Yeah, it's so coming into school, I was open to whatever opportunity made sense. While I was a student at ICO, I had convinced myself that I was actually not moving back to Canada. I was moving to California, and that was it. Nobody was going to tell me otherwise. And so I actually I signed up to be a student member of the California Optometric Association, and I would receive their journals, and I would just cold email all of the doctors who were listed in the back of the journals and tell them, I'm going to graduate one day. I'm going to be great, and I want to work with you. And I would learn a little bit about each of them. And so I would go onto their websites and find out what it was that they did, so I could find that chance to work with them. So of course, most of them are going to be private practitioners. So I did eventually think that I would try to get on as an associate and hopefully have an opportunity to buy into a practice or something like that. At the end of it all, when that practice opportunity presented itself in Florida, it was a large group similar to how I practice now. It was 5 or 6 locations spread across the state, family practice, husband and wife owned it. Their father was an optometrist. The brother-in-law was an optometrist. There were numerous people in the family who had their hands in that group. And so we took that opportunity, but always had in the back of our minds that when the opportunity presented itself and when the timing was right, that we would look at starting our own thing. And so we were in Winnipeg for a surprise birthday party that I had set up for my wife, who is from Winnipeg. And in that time, we actually had an opportunity to take a look at a practice that was available. And we did that in January. And by March, we had given our employers 6 months notice, and we started registering business names with the Canada Revenue Agency. And so ultimately, it was exactly what we were looking for. Being in private practice was the right thing for us, not necessarily the only option. There are numerous options available, but it was the right one for us. It is busy, people often think, you're your own boss and you get to do whatever you want. You can come and go as you please. And while there is an element of control of your schedule, we, especially as husband and wife, our dinner conversation is probably really boring for our kids because we're talking about our staff or our patients or whatever else much of the time. And so there's the thing about being a practice owner is you do have to love it. You have to love it. Just like being a practitioner of any sort, you have to love it, right? You do it because you want to help the people who you see every day, and practice ownership is no different. You have to enjoy what you do. And so there are times when you're just doing your best to keep your head above water, but you're doing it because it is what you feel you need to do so you can give back to the community. And I think that when you see the smiling faces of your staff or employees, we just had our holiday party last week, and our team was so happy that they had a chance to enjoy some time, not thinking about work, not talking about work, and just enjoy each other. And that's what makes me kind of look back and say this was the right decision. When the patients are happy, when the team is happy, then it means we're in the right place.
Great. Thank you for sharing. So, Dr. Francis, I'll start with the original question. So, what is your current practice setting and what is your typical day like?
So I am at a private practice as well. My typical day, so I'm pretty much full-time, and it was nice to kind of actually walk into this full-time after residency. It was actually a doctor, you know how we have the summer off between first and second year? We have like a couple months. So I had come back home and I was like, who's going to hire me for 2.5 months? And so I was like, same thing, putting out feelers in the area. And the doctor who I work with now said, he didn't have anything to hire, but I could intern. And so as much as I appreciate it, I just stayed in contact with him, but I ended up getting a job elsewhere who'd hired me for the summer. And so in optometry, at just the front desk in the clinic. And so, but we kept in contact throughout the year. And just before starting residency, he said, hey, what are you doing after residency? And I said, I don't know. I haven't started yet. I haven't thought that far. I'm just trying to pack my bag to go to residency. So he had an opportunity for the following year. So it was nice to kind of get that ahead of time. So that was good. And so it's a private practice, full scope, more medical. So I'm able to do everything, which I liked. I was worried about coming back, especially back to Canada, knowing, of course, the education we receive in the States and at ICO. We are pretty much taught everything where, we can, or to the scope of all states. And so I was nervous about coming back here and being quite limited. And so it was a pleasant surprise that we're able to practice, full scope. Of course, there's certain things I can't do here than we could there, but my day involves a little bit of everything. I have just routine eye exams. I have specialty contacts, soft contacts, pediatrics, myopia control, what else? Dry eye, we're doing IPLs and radio frequencies and some of those other special treatments and lipoflows and things like that. So I get a little bit of everything, which is great. And of course, disease, so sprinkled in there as well. So it's nice to be able to take all the education from ICO and residency and use it here. It's never a dull day. It's not always routine and not always, the same thing. I think in that regard, I'd get bored, honestly. So it's nice to have a mix of everything. So I'm using everything I've learned. And I think that another thing going back to residency, I don't know, I love the fact that I did it because I just feel way more prepared of handling anything that walks through the door. Of course, there might be things that I'm not sure about. There's other doctors there I can consult with, but I just remember like now how I feel and then how I felt just like right before grad, although I was prepared and like eager to do anything. It's nice to have almost a sense of calm of I know what I'm doing kind of thing. So, but yeah, that's what I'm doing now at a private practice in London.
Great. And I was going to ask you, how do you feel, ICO prepared you for your career? And I think you sort of summed it up right there. But I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but
I will say as well, just touching on even what Dr. Lusu said earlier, how other doctors or other practices have noted, and you've noticed how well ICO students are prepared. Even in my externship year, some of those doctors have mentioned how, I went on externships with a couple of ICO students, and then of course they accepted other students from other schools, and the attendings have mentioned as well how prepared we are, which is great. And the other thing is that the students have also mentioned, they'd be like, oh, you've seen that before, or, oh, I've only seen it in a textbook. And I'm like, well, this is a routine day for, so it's like, it was very interesting to see the differences in externships, hearing that from the other students too. So I think what goes a long way is, of course, our patient base, which is another reason why I decided on ICO, was just not only the diversity of the patients, but just what I get to see. And it just ties back into, I wanted all the opportunities. So same thing, I just wanted to be able to handle anything that came through the door. So it was nice in that regard, in terms of our education, feeling that ICO prepared.
Great. And Dr. Wusu talked a little bit about this when he was talking about his modality and his typical work day, sort of that balance between, your home life and your work life. A lot of people like optometry because you can have that balance, and I always tell students it just depends on how you're just deciding to practice, because of course, if you're a private practitioner, you're going to be a lot busier. You're also running a business. So Dr. Francis, for you, sort of what is your work-life balance like?
Actually pretty good. I'm full-time, like I mentioned, and then I work every other Saturday morning. But and then I have a half day on Mondays and Wednesdays, really. But it's pretty great. I'm loving my schedule right now. I have time to do things in the evenings and weekends and enjoy social time, of course, with friends and family. It's nice to have, of course, I don't have the responsibility of managing a staff or anything like that. I go into work, I do it, I come home, since I'm an associate there. So I would say, it's pretty good. It's nice to be able to have that flexibility. And then, of course, with here being, so I'm an independent optometrist. So if I need time off or anything like that, within reason, of course, speaking to the doc who owns a practice, that's also very flexible as well. So I think there's lots of opportunity to kind of enjoy life while you're working too.
All right. And so Dr. Uso, I want to ask you a little bit about sort of your involvement in your community. I think, we talked about ICO's sort of community involvement and the fact that we promote students being involved. So just a little bit about, being a practitioner, seasoned practitioner, sort of how do you give back to your community?
Yeah, we try to find as many different ways as possible to give back. We have found that with the role that we're in, you end up being a person in the community who everybody sort of gets to know. And so if we have a chance to share or give back, then we do. So we regularly, both my wife and I regularly speak to students. We'll go to high schools, universities, and speak to the students about this profession or about just medical professions in general, or even just being in science and trying to understand what that means and how you can sort of parlay that into the next step of your education if you wanted to do something more. We have a scholarship that we established for undergraduate student. I used to coach high school football at an inner city school here in Winnipeg, where the graduation rate was quite low. And so as sort of a carrot for some of these student athletes, we decided that we'd create a scholarship so they could have an opportunity to consider post-secondary education. So the scholarship is set up such that they get a portion of the funds as soon as they register for their first semester, and then they get the second disbursement of it when they complete their first semester and ensure that they're registered for their second semester. So really just promoting education and the idea of sticking with it. You know, it's tough. It's never going to be easy. And no matter what level you're at, whether it's an undergrad or optometry school, you're always thinking, boy, this is really difficult, and I'm not sure that I want to push through this. It may be harder than I want it to be. Maybe I should think about doing something that's shorter or whatever that may be. And so we try to provide opportunity for some of these students to think about sticking through it just by a little bit of support from us. And so we keep in touch with each of the students who we've worked with. We have one student actually who just graduated dental school. And so, oh, Siri is listening to me here. I'm sorry. So we have one student who just graduated dental school. So that's pretty cool. We were really excited to see that he's completed that. And at the time, actually, when I was coaching him high school football, he had no plans of going to post-secondary at all. And so that is one of the ways that we try to give back. And then beyond that, you know, I try to give back in Chicago. I'm on the board of trustees at ICO. I'm on the alumni council at ICO. I'm actually the president of the Manitoba Association of Optometrists. So I try to find as many different ways to share and give of my time as I possibly can. And so, yeah, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to find ways to give back. And sometimes that might be financially, sometimes that might just be of our time, but however you can as an individual, I think it's important to find ways. And so even just mentoring students, you know, I probably write about 5 to 7 reference letters every year for optometry students, and something like that can go a long way for people, because it might help pave the way for what they want to do, and even just having a conversation. So I think my old man moral of my story here is that if there's an opportunity to give back, I think that we should all find a way to take it, because it's really rewarding to see a smile on their face or the success that they have down the road.
Great. And sort of some of your involvement, you know, being on the board of trustees at ICO and being involved with the Alumni Council, sort of what is that like for you now, being an alum, and now you can have a say or involvement in how the institution is sort of doing? Because I remember you from your, because I started about in 2006, and I think you're a student then, and I know you were involved with the Student Association is what I remember, but now sort of fast forward and we're 16 years later, still ICO, and I know exactly. and you're still involved, but in a different capacity. How does it feel to sort of be in that sort of leadership role as an alum?
Yeah, you know, it feels incredible. So first of all, from the Alumni Council perspective, it feels great because I have the opportunity to continue to connect with those who graduated from ICO just like me, you know, and so it's really nice to see how well everybody is doing, and it's nice to maintain that sort of bond, because we've all come from the same place. We've all sort of done it together, and so like we were saying earlier, whether it's at different meetings or wherever it may be, you run into these ICO alum, and it's like you just saw them yesterday, you know, and there's a connection there. So it's great. My role on the board, I feel that one of the things that I'm always trying to do is ensure that whatever it is that we're discussing, my primary thought is, how does this impact the students? I had a great experience at ICO. It was if I was to do it all again, I would do it the exact same way. I'm really happy with the experience, and ICO was a great place for me, and for many of those around me. And so my thought now is, if I can find ways to make the experience at ICO even just that much better for whoever's there today. While they may not know directly that it has anything to do with what we're doing, I just want them to feel it. You know, we don't need anybody to come to us and say, hey, this is what we notice and we appreciate it. That's not the purpose of it at all. It's really having everybody graduate and say that was the best 4 years that I've experienced, you know. And so it feels great to walk around the school, to have an opportunity to chat with some of the students when we, you know, we've met with some students in the library or wherever it may be, and sort of see it from the other side. And I remember sitting there being a little bit nervous, thinking, I don't know if I can talk to these doctors. But just like Dr. Francis said, like we're all the same, you know. We went to the same school. We all put on our pants one leg at a time. You know, we're people too. And so it's nice to have that opportunity to sort of reassure some of these students that that their hard work is worth it and they should keep pushing through it, and that they, if they get an opportunity, they should take every chance to enjoy the city, enjoy the school, and have a chance to look back one day and say this was probably 4 best years. I will say I'm very happy now, but my wife and I both actually would say it's probably the 4 best years of our life.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to remind first years of that, like, listen, I know it's tough. It's tough. You gotta see, you know, you gotta look beyond sort of this moment, and you will at some point, once you've graduated and have time to practice, sort of see the benefits of sort of all your hard work that you put into it.
Right.
Yeah. So Dr. Francis, I'll ask you sort of your community involvement, but then also I know you also did SPOS trips. So I was going to ask sort of talk a little bit about mission trip opportunities that our students have as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I haven't been specifically with London too involved yet, since I've been here for about 5 months. Wow, 5 months, time flies. So for about 5 months, but I will say, similar to Dr. Wu, so I would like to get involved with things like, I mean, that was always a plan. Well, there's school screenings, speaking at the local schools here. I actually had one of my friends, he is a kindergarten teacher, and had asked me to do something like that, just a virtual like helper for the school. So just things like that, getting kind of involved in the community in a small way. So doing things like that. And then the other thing as well that you mentioned is mentorship. So I know even a lot of students, even ICO, like current ICO students, who would reach out and say, oh, how was residency? Did you apply? What was the application process like? How was the transition back to, back to Canada? Like things like that. I think the mentorship is huge. And that's important to me because I was fortunate enough to have a lot of students, ICO students as well, in the years ahead of me to do the same thing for me. And I can ask them questions. I DM them on Instagram, like, hey, like just random question, but like, what about this? Or, certain things like that. So it's nice to have someone to reach out to in that way. In terms of SPOSH, yes, I was a member of SPOSH as well. And I was able to do a trip in my second year, a few of my classmates and we went to Jamaica for a mission trip to do eye exams through an institute called Eye Health Institute based out of Colorado. They have a lot of U.S. doctors, but also Canadian doctors as well. There's actually a faculty member at Waterloo who goes on the trip as well. And then students from both the States and Canada. That was an awesome experience. Not only just giving back, you had the experience to go somewhere, but also to give back. And that one was extra special because I was born in Jamaica. So it was nice to kind of go home and do those eye exams. And, we have ophthalmologists that come too. So we did surgeries as well. I think the opportunity is there to give back, whether that's vision screenings. ICO has a lot of vision screenings that they do in the community. But also on extended trips or longer trips or out of country trips as well through SPOSH. And so how that worked was we volunteered different hours during the year at different events that kind of got you a certain amount of hours. And then I think how with that, it was they paid for with donations and things like that with SPOSH, they paid for a part of your trip. So it was nice to have that opportunity there. But not only SPOSH does it, I think the Christian Association does that. It does a trip as well. So there's a number of different opportunities to do these trips and give back. But I think it was an invaluable experience. And again, goes to the whole, you meet people from other schools, you meet other doctors in different areas areas too. So, all those doctors I stayed in touch with from second year, it was nice to go back. I just went back on that same trip a few weeks ago. And so it was nice to reconnect with them as well and meet other students. And now going as a supervisor, it was nice to supervise those interns. They were all from Waterloo this year and they did phenomenal. So it was nice to kind of make new connections in that way and share my knowledge too of Jamaica and of the trip too. So it was awesome.
Awesome. So we're going to sort of wrap up here in a little bit and sort of I have some advice I want you to give. So two different audiences. So we have prospective students who may be, first, second year in university and maybe stumbled across this and are considering optometry or know optometry is what they want to do. Sort of any advice for them in terms of what they can be doing at the university level to even prepare for optometry school. So that's sort of the first group. And then the second group would be those who are going to be joining us, next fall. So folks who've interviewed, have either been accepted or have placed that deposit and they secured their seats next year's class, which is always music to my ears, and sort of advice for them on that transition to ICO and life, especially in that first year of optometry school, which can be, challenging for some. So Dr. Francis, do you want to start?
Sure. I will say, especially for the students that are coming into ICO in the fall, yes, it's hard, but take the time for you. It's equally beneficial. I think, like we've both said, just to make the most of the opportunities there, and especially the social aspects of it too. I hate to, for me at least, this was my pitfall in fall quarter. I thought I took 2 years off between undergrad and optometry school. So I thought, okay, I really had to buckle down and that's all I needed to do was study. And that was it. That was my life. But that's not, you quickly burn out. So it was really, and actually it was one of the faculty members that gave me this advice was take time for yourself, go out. I know it's stressful, but go see the city, even if it's for a few hours a day. So I think that would be my biggest advice is balance is important as much as doing well and getting that, A on the exam thing, makes you think that's the world and that's all that matters right now. But it's equally beneficial to take the time for yourself because you got to take care of yourself in order to do well. So a good balance is important.
All right, Dr. Wusu, what advice do you have?
Well, first, I'd like to double down on what she just said. I had an experience. I was back in my first year. I was back for Christmas, and my friends said, "Oh my goodness, how was your experience in Chicago? Tell me about the city." And I said, "I have no idea about the city. I haven't gone anywhere yet. I haven't done anything." And it was busy. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I doing? What a waste. And so yes, I was doing well in school. I was involved, and I was very happy. But I was living in one of the best cities in the world, and I hadn't yet taken an opportunity to see anything about it. So just answering that question when I was back home made me stop and kind of think I need to do this a little bit differently, and I'm glad I did. So I completely agree. Take time to enjoy the city of Chicago. There are very few places like it. It's a wonderful place. It's fun. It's music, art, sports, whatever you're into. Chicago has it, and while you are there for a good education, you should take advantage of that opportunity to enjoy the city as well. But as far as advice for undergraduate students, I would say learn about the profession to the best of your ability. Of course, with the internet, we can find anything we want to find, but I think the most effective way is to go find an optometrist and chat with them about it. In fact, I'm very impressed. I'm being interviewed by a student who's in grade 9 in January, because she's doing it as a project for school because she wants to consider this as a profession. And I thought, well, that's incredible. She's in grade 9 and she wants to understand what this means. And I think she's hit the nail on the head. This is the way to find out. If you really want to understand what the profession has to offer, then I think it's important that you take that opportunity to meet the people who are in the trenches every day, people who are doing it, people who are living it, because from them you can learn what it is about their job that they love, what it is about their job that they may not love, and what they would do differently if they were given an opportunity, or if their personal life was maybe set up such that they could explore a different opportunity, move to a different city, practice in a state or province that has a different scope of practice, things like that. And so you can't really understand those things until you talk to the people who are doing it. So I think my best advice would be to take advantage of those opportunities to sit down with with those who are living it on a day-to-day and find out what it is that they do, and not to be shy about it. Reach out, do like I did when I was a first year student, reach out to 10, 20, 30 docs by email, and the worst they can say is no. It's not personal, they just may be busy. But when you find that opportunity to meet with that one person who is willing to give up their time, ask them the questions, ask them the difficult questions. And I think that's probably the smartest thing you can do to find out if it's for you and how you can appropriately prepare.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very good point. We actually in the admissions office this week had a mom reach out to us because her daughter is a high schooler, and her subject was like, "Do you talk to high schoolers?" And I was like, "Yes, we talk to anybody who was interested in the
Yeah.
profession of optometry," because I think that's a great opportunity for us to plant the seed. And at least now they know, they've done their research, and if they decide to look at something else, but who knows, optometry may draw them back. So I always encourage folks, if you can talk to ODs as many as you can, that's always going to be beneficial for you. You can never go wrong with that. Dr. Francis, did you have anything for those who may be an undergrad?
That was actually my exact same thought, is to do the same thing. I remember, and I did the same thing in when I was thinking about optometry school. I met with a local optometrist here and just went in and shadowed and just see what the day was like, see what it was about. And I think that's invaluable in knowing if it's the right fit, if that's something you're interested in. You can ask any questions. We're nice, so ask us anything. So they'll be able to answer. So I think that I just wholeheartedly agree. I think it's really important to just kind of ask the questions you need and to see if that's going to be a good fit.
If I could add one thing, because we kept talking about exploring and enjoying Chicago, and I mentioned even earlier how sort of the stigma or things that you hear from other schools, and I want to make really clear, like I'm Canadian born. There was never a moment when I felt unsafe in Chicago, and there's still never a moment. I'm back in Chicago probably, I don't even know what it is, probably 5 to 8 times a year on campus, and there's never a moment when I feel unsafe. I think like anywhere else, we have to be smart about our environment, but I don't think that's exclusive to Chicago. I think that's literally every city there is. You have to be smart about how you carry yourself and what you're doing. And so I while I had heard different things, and I'm sure as a parent, you might want to ask some of those questions. Is this going to be okay for my child? Or as a student, am I going to be okay while I'm there? And I think that if you were to talk to probably anybody who's graduated from ICO, or at least I'll speak for myself, there's very little that I could say about the city that would make me think that one shouldn't live there. In fact, I'd go as far as saying Chicago is my favorite city, bar none. Chicago is my favorite city, and so I would never want anybody who's considering it, say they're an undergrad and they're thinking about whether or not they should be there, or they've made their deposit and they're thinking about coming next year and they're nervous or concerned about how things might go. I think everybody should rest assured that it's a great place to be and that they should feel very comfortable.
Yeah, I would echo that. I actually was born and raised in Chicago and spent many years within that Brownsville community. I went to high school in that area, and I used to work at the institution across the street. So, it's the same thing. I tell students, it's going to be, one of those things where just like your undergrad campus safety or public safety officers tell you, be smart, about your surroundings, be mindful. It's always nice to be in numbers if you're going to be out late, and just sort of, pay attention. But it's great that we have a great security team on campus. They're there 24/7. So even when we're out, for the next couple of weeks here, somebody's always going to be at the institution. So if a student's coming in, walking through the halls, maybe they parked their car and they're going back to the residence, somebody is always going to be on campus and looking out for you. So
Right.
that's always nice. And we've added the last few years here, we have a safety van that can take people to different locations. So I always encourage students, ask the staff how they feel, ask students, get their perspective on that safety feature. And sort of then ultimately make that decision for you if you feel like, all right, I've been given enough that's going to make me feel secure when I'm on campus, which is important. And so, yeah. So thank you for sort of bringing that up, Dr. Francis.
Yeah, I came actually for my interview. That was one thing, because that was one thing my parents were obviously concerned about. I'm in Farmtown, Canada, and so they're obviously worried about that. And so it wasn't until, I think it was so funny too, the security office, I think, was like the last stop on the tour. And then they went in and they saw, of course, all the cameras. I'll talk to all the security guys, and then we walked out and they're like, "Okay, I'm good. You can go. You're like, that's fine." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So it is, I will say you're right. Like, there's always someone that's there. And I actually use a security van to take, because I lived off campus during my second and third year. I was on the residence complex in first year. And so making use of that as well, they'll take you to where you need to go in the area. So yeah, they've been awesome.
Yeah, great. Well, those are all the questions I have for you. I'll see. I know we have somebody on the in the meeting with us now to see if they have any questions for our speakers before we sort of wrap up here. I didn't see anything in the Q&A nor the chat. And I'll double check. Nope, I didn't see anything. So I would say we are, done. I do thank you both for your time. It was sort of great to, like I said, I know you both, but it's always nice to hear more of your story, because it's just more to it that's always behind why people chose ICO and sort of their experiences. Being there as a student, and now again being involved on different levels within the institution. And so maybe Dr. Francis, you too in the future will be, whether board of trustees or alumni council, something like that. No pressure, just saying.
It's nice being an ambassador, so who knows? Maybe the opportunity will arise.
Yeah, but I think that's one thing that, in the admissions office, we appreciate, is having alumni be ambassadors, being willing to work with us, to host students, to ask questions. And we do appreciate it when they write interviews, because it's always nice to get their feedback on someone who we spend an hour with, but they've been able to spend more time with, and provide a honest assessment on their potential for the program. So I thank you, Dr. Wusu, for your letters. I read them all as they come across. And I'm sure, Dr. Francis, at some time in the near future, you may be in that same position to be able to write a letter of recommendation for students or potential students. Well, I thank you both. I'm going to stop the recording now.
All right.
Thank you.